Hello fellow Unreal Engine developers. In the last episode of Create a Tropical Island, we added our grass and trees, and today I'm going to show you how to add rocks and boulders around our shoreline. I'll also show you how to use virtual texture blending in order to make them fit in better with the underlying textures, and we'll also add collision to our large boulders so that our player can climb up on our rocks. So without any further ado, let's rock and roll. We now have our island sculpted, textured, and with foliage and trees. And if you haven't got to this point yet, then follow the playlist in the description below just to catch up on where we are. Today we're going to add rocks. So first thing we need to do is get hold of the rock packs from the Quixel Megascans that we're going to use. So up in the top, go into the Add to the Project menu and go to Quixel Bridge. And then search for Thai Beach, 3D Assets, and you'll find these three packs. So you've got the Thai Beach Rocks pack, which I'm going to use for the large rocks, and then even though these are called the same, Thai Beach Corals pack. One of them is for small, almost shell-like rocks, and the other one is going to be for our medium-sized or small to medium-sized rocks. So I want you to grab all three packs here. I've already downloaded them before, so select them. So I'm selecting each pack here, and you should have these three: Thai Beach Rocks pack and two Thai Beach Corals pack, one with a sort of algae or lichen on it and one that looks like shells. Choose the quality you want. I'm going to go for high quality. If your system is less powered, you can go for medium quality, and then click on download, and then once that's finished, click on add to add to your project. And that will add three folders: Megascans, 3D Assets, and you'll have three folders of rocks with those packs. So you can now shut that down, shut down the bridge, and let's now talk about how we're going to scatter these rocks around on the island. So we can do it in a number of ways. We could use a similar method to how we did the foliage. So we could use a smart mask to create an area around where the sea meets the sand. I want to paint the rocks around the sort of the coastline. The problem with that approach, as I mentioned in the foliage video, is that masks and landscape grass types don't support collisions, and we'll definitely need to support collisions for our big rocks. Otherwise it will look pretty odd when our player runs through the rocky outcrop. So that means we have to use one of the other two methods. We either have to paint them manually, or we have to use procedural foliage volumes. And I don't think procedural foliage volumes are the way to go for this, because you tend to do procedural foliage volumes in sort of blocky areas, and you'd have to do a lot of setup for that. And to be honest, painting these in manually is going to be pretty quick and pretty straightforward. So let's go with that approach. So what we'll do is we will go into the select mode menu, and we'll go into our foliage mode. And what we now need to do is open up our content drawer and drag in our rocks to the foliage. So if you go to the Megascans 3D Assets, and let's start off with our rocks pack. So there are 5 variations of rocks here. Here is variation 1, variation 2, and variation 5. So click on the first one. These are the static meshes. Click on the last one, shift click, so you've got all 5 selected, and then drag them into the foliage section here, and it will add those in. Now close down your asset drawer, and what we need to do now is just set up the foliage parameters here. So click on the first one and then shift click on the last rock. That way we can adjust these parameters for each rock all at the same time. And what we want to do is first of all choose a density for our rocks, and I'm going to leave it at 100. That's 100 rocks per 10 square meters. And then in terms of the sizes, we've got a minimum and a maximum of 1. These are actually quite small rocks. I want large boulders, so I'll leave the minimum at 1 and I'll whack the maximum up to 30. So that's going to make some nice big boulders. And then let's have a look at the brush size we've got at the moment. It's a little bit small. I want the rocks to come in to about there, and I also want them to go out into the sea as well. It'll really look nice if some of the rocks are submerged in water or even underwater. It will soften this line, and definitely around where the rock meets the water we're going to paint some as well. So let's make the brush size 1000, and let's just have a go. Let's just because you can always get rid of them afterwards, so I'm literally just going to click with the mouse, and that's it's way too dense there. So let's do Control Z, and let's actually just put our paint density down. So I'm going to make this 0.01. Let's try it again. That's better. So I'm not holding and dragging, I'm just sort of clicking and then moving along. And we're getting a nice distribution of rocks there. You can always go back over areas. And what I want to do is continue coming around this this beach, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a gap. So we're going to have a sort of a man-made harbour here so that we can add in our boardwalk later on. So leave a gap and then start painting again. And as I said, don't be afraid to go into the water a bit. And we're going to add some other rocks in a minute as well, so even though it's a bit sparse in some of these areas, that's probably okay. And you can always come back. Remember, shift and click if you want to erase anything, but you can always come back and add more. And although I'm not going to do the whole island now, you do really want to go around the whole island and add rocks in different areas. They may look a bit strange in terms of colour compared to the textures they're underneath, but that's where our texture blending, which we're going to do later on in this tutorial, will really come in handy. So I'm not going to go around and do everything because it's too time consuming for the tutorial, but take your time and go around and paint the rocks the way you want them. So I'll leave that for now, and let's now move to our next group of rocks. So these are our biggest rocks. Let's now put in our small, medium to small size rocks. So open up your content drawer and go to the Thai Beach Corals pack, the one that has UE5 in the start. They've got, if I click on one where you can see one of the thumbnails here, it's kind of got a green moss on it. So again, click on all 5 of these. There are 5 variations. So click on the first one, shift click on the last one, and drag it into the foliage. And so we've now got this new section here. You can tell it's these ones here because they've got a count of 0 because none of them are being painted at the moment. So click on the first one, click on the last one, and in terms of density for these rocks, I'll go for 300, so a few more of these rocks, and I'll start at 1, which is quite small, and I'll go up to 10. So we're going to have them at a sort of small size. It's going to be a third the size of these rocks in maximum. So again, we can just go around with them selected. Just make sure, now you see these ones are selected as well, so just make sure you unselect the first pack of rocks. So now we've just got the beach corals pack selected, and again let's just click and add, and you can see we're filling in some of those gaps here. Don't be afraid to go out into the sea a bit. And again, leave some, maybe just on the fringes of the harbour there, and then leave the natural harbour. And we will put some more here, maybe even some going into the foliage a bit. Okay, that's looking good. And then to finish off with, we'll add some small rocks for just detail. So come out, well, don't have to come out of here, just go back into your 3D assets, go to the other corals pack. You can see this one here with this sort of spongy look. These rocks look a bit more like sort of fossils or shells. So again, select the first one, shift select the fifth one. They all come in packs of 5. Drag it over here until it goes yellow. And then what we'll do is we'll set up the parameters for this. So select the first one, shift select the last one, and we'll put the density of these back to 100 because we don't want too many of these. And in terms of size, you want these to be the smallest, so going from 1 to 2. And then we'll just paint them again. You might not even see, maybe we need to get a bit closer to see this. So you might want to up the density slightly. They are getting painted on there, but just not very many. Let's go closer in again. And you can see they're the smallest ones here. So maybe up the density of these to 200, or up the density, paint density here. It's up to you. And then don't forget to paint some over on this side as well, and around the rest of the island. And I'm going to put a few of these going into the grass area as well. Okay, so we've painted our rocks. Let's go into play mode. Just zoom in here. Go into play. Save first. And now if I run around, I can see all our rocks. Now the only thing I would say at the moment is they don't really look as though they all fit together or in the environment. So these medium-sized rocks they've got that green tinge from the algae. The larger rocks are sort of slightly rust and red coloured, and the small ones are not too bad. They're sort of white, shell-like. They could maybe stay as we are. So it is a good time for me to introduce you to the concept of virtual texture blending. So let's cover that. So just to explain the concept of virtual texture blending, virtual textures in the Unreal Engine allow you to write the texture material for an area, so in our case the whole landscape, and the texture height information, and then we can use that information with our meshes that sit on the landscape in order to create a sort of a blend between the material, say for this rock here, and the underlying texture, so it will look like the sand has blended in with the rock and maybe even on the top of it as well. And it really helps to allow objects to sit well in the environment, and it's a very easy thing to do, and particularly as we're using the open land material, it makes it even easier both to set up virtual textures in the first place and then to apply them to your material. First thing you need to do is go into the edit project settings and switch on virtual texture support. So just type virtual texture in the search, and you want to check this enable virtual texture support, and it will say that a restart is required. So click on restart now. If you have to save as you're going out, do so you don't lose any of the work you've done so far. And then once we come back in, nothing would have changed. It will just take a while to recompile the shaders. Okay, and let's just find ourselves a nice position here to see a variety of rocks. Okay, this is just so that we can see the effect of the blending when we apply it. So as I said, the first thing we need to do is go into the Open Land widgets folder, find the Open Land RVT widget, right click it and run it. And it finds your landscape in the outliner. Click on Add RVT Support, and you just got to do a couple of things manually following these instructions. So first thing is find this RVT volume height in your outliner, and in the virtual texture set it to RVT Open Land Height, and then go to the RVT volume material, and in the virtual texture set up RVT Open Land Material. And these instructions now disappear because you've done everything it's required, and you can close that down and click Save. So what that's done is it's set up a volume that covers the landscape to capture the height and material, and it's also in the landscape, if we go down to the virtual texture section, it's created two elements, and eventually you'll see in here that they are textures that show the height information and the texture material information. So they are now ready to be used in any material for blending. And again, Open Land provides a very simple node to add to your materials to set up this runtime virtual texture blending. So what we'll do is we'll start off with the big rocks here. So open up your content drawer, go into your Megascans 3D assets and choose the Thai Beach Rocks pack. And you'll see that there's one material instance that covers all of the 5 rocks. So double click on that to open it up. It's called MI Thai Beach Rocks pack, and then some other characters. And let's just move that over to the right hand side of the screen. And you can see that this material instance at the moment covers parameters such as the color, specular, roughness. So you can do some amendments to this rock look and feel. You can change the color. This is similar to what we did with the foliage. We darkened it, but it doesn't have any parameters for runtime virtual texturing yet, because we need to add a node in to provide the parameters. So what we will do now is we will find the master material associated with this material instance. So in the toolbar, find this hierarchy section, and the parent of this is the Megascans default material. Now be aware, I'll actually just drag this onto the main screen. Be aware that this Megascans default material is used for all of the hard surface materials that you take in from Megascans. So if we add in runtime virtual texture blending, it will apply to all Megascans materials, but there is a parameter that you can switch it on or off. So even if you don't want it, you can set the RVT blending to 0, and that will appear just as if it didn't have the blending in there. So this couldn't be simpler. So here's the material. It's quite a simple material. Find the endpoint here where it outputs the material attributes, and from this adjustments node, drag out and type in RVT, and you want to use this Open Land RVT blend with attributes, and then pipe the result of that into the final output. So this blend will take the existing attributes of the material and just add some runtime virtual texture blending on top of it. And if you just drag this out a bit, just so you can see your scene here, I'm just going to move it along slightly before you save. You'll see that as soon as I type save, watch those rocks. Can you see that they have started to take on the underlying features of the texture? So we can now play around with some of these RVT blending parameters, and that applied to all of the rocks, because all of the rocks use this MS default material as their parent material. So let's close this down now, and you'll notice on the material instance for our rocks, if we go down to the bottom, we now have a new section for attributes to do with RVT blending. So if I start off looking at the blending intensity, so look at these two big rocks in the foreground. If I change the blending intensity to 0, the material goes back to how it was. And if I change the blending intensity to 1, it then starts to use the texture that's underneath the rock in order to do some blending of the textures. And there are quite a few parameters to play with here. So in terms of the blend smoothing and contrast, you can play around with these. If you change the contrast here, for example, to 5, it adds more of the underlying texture, so we get more of the sand here on there. And the other ones I often play with are the normal contrasts and normal sharpness, so you can see it. So if you make the normal contrast 0, it covers the whole thing, although it looks a bit jagged at the end, so you probably don't want to use 0. 0.5, so we've got a little bit of the texture here, and then the normal sharpness, we could smooth that off a bit. So you can see that what we've ended up with is our rocks look as though they have a bit of the, let's go up, a bit of the sand on top, and then on the flat areas, and then they also have a bit of the sand on the side where the sand meets the rocks. And then we can just play around with the other types as well. For example, these medium-sized rocks, I want to really hide the green because the green doesn't fit in with the surrounding colours. So let's save that. So in order to change the green rocks, we need to find the material instance for that rock pack, and we can change the RVT blending for those group of rocks. So go back into your content drawer, go to the first corals pack. You can see these are the ones you can see in the thumbnails, the green ones, and then choose the MI Thai Beach Corals pack. Go down to the RVT blending. Let's just select the parameters we want to change. Again, if we want to be certain it's these pack, if I press 0, yeah, you can see those are the green ones. So I'm going to set this up to 1, and for the normal contrast and sharpness, let's make the normal contrast 0. So that pretty much covers all of the green, and then the normal sharpness, I'll make it 1. That doesn't really make much difference, but that's pretty much, you can see a little bit of the green there, but it's almost completely covered in the underlying texture now, which is what I wanted. And then the smaller rocks here, the shell-like ones, let's see if I can find a couple of examples. They're these ones. Maybe I want to allow those to show through a bit more. So let's go into our last pack here, and again open up the material instance, go down to the RVT blending. Let's select the parameters I want to potentially change. Again, just change the blending intensity to 0, just so I can see which ones I'm dealing with. It's these ones here. Let's just move this over so I can read the names, and let's make the normal contrast, actually let's see what happens if I make this bigger. Oh, need to make the blending intensity 1, so I'm doing it. So if I make this 5, 10, well, you can see that 0 is going to cover it with sand, 5 is going to show through a bit. See the normal sharpness, that if I've set it to 0, I can see pretty much everything. something like that. 2 means I see the bottom of it, but a bit of sand covers the top. So you can play around with these, but what you can see is that it has made the rocks really fit in with the landscape by using that blending. Probably need to add a few more rocks here, but I'll leave you to do that at your leisure. There is one final thing we need to do with rocks though, and I'll show you the problem if I go into play mode and we run through our rocks, and there is no collision. It's fine for the tiny rocks. I wouldn't bother setting up collision for these tiny ones, but these big rocks are not going to cut the mustard if you can run through them. So let's move on to showing you how to set up collision for our big rocks. The first thing we need to do in order to set up collision for our big rocks is to enable it on the foliage type. So go back into your foliage mode, so select mode foliage, and we want to use these big rocks here, so it's make sure you're on the Thai Beach rocks pack and select all 5 of these. So what you can do is you can click on the first one, shift click on the last one, and then click on the checkbox to select them all. And then if you go down to the collision section in the details, here are collision presets. At the moment it's set to no collision, so if you do block all and then come out of foliage mode, you might think that's sufficient to block our character. Go into play mode, and if we run through our rocks, we still have no collision, and that's because even though we've specified that these rocks should block our character, they don't at the moment have any collision vertices created for the rocks, so we need to set those up. There are different collision types you can set up, and I'll show you what we need to do there. So let's come out of play mode, go into our content drawer, pick our Thai Beach rocks pack, and you have to do it for each of these rocks individually, although it's very quick to do because each of them has a different shape. So let's start off with this first one, open it up, let's dock it to our main window and go in here. If you press in the viewport and do F, it'll zoom in or frame the rock, and you probably don't have this window here. If you go up to collision, you can set up all sorts of collision types. Now if you added sort of simplified collisions here, they wouldn't look right. If you added a box around here, it would look like you're floating in air on this edge and this edge. It would only look right in the middle. So what we want to do is a more complicated collision, and we'll use this auto convex collision. I showed you this if you did my Glacier Valley landscape tutorial. You saw I use the same technique there. So do auto convex collision, and then you can specify the parameters. The hull position you tend not to change. You can just up the hull count and maximum hull vertices. I believe the defaults are 4 and 8, and may be wrong there, but if you set it to 4 and 16, that will give you probably enough detail on these rocks to cover all the surfaces and look like you're not floating on top of the rock. So with those parameters set, just click on apply, and you see here it sets up the collision around here. If you can't see it, I think you can do show collision somewhere, probably up here. It probably does it by default. So you have your collision there, and if we now save that and come out, go into play mode, at least one of these rocks, not sure which one, is going to have collision on it. Can't find it at the moment. Ah, there it is. So this one here, and you can see that it does look pretty realistic, coming up and jumping off. So let's quickly set up the other 4, and then we'll see if it looks accurate as we run around. So come out of play mode. Let's go into number 2, and literally all we have to do is click on apply with those parameters that were set, save, go into number 3, apply, save, number 4, apply, save, and last one, open it up, apply, and save. And now we can shut all of those meshes down. Let's do a quick save. Let's go into play mode, and hopefully if we go over all these rocks, see, even this one blocks it, so I have to jump up onto it. And it's looking pretty accurate. If the accuracy isn't as you would want it, then you can go in and up those hull vertices and counts to suit. But we're pretty much done with our rocks. Just one aside here, you'll notice with this mannequin in UE5, if I go step up on something, the foot actually reflects the correct position of that leg. That's using an IK rig on the feet, so it really adds to the realism as you're climbing up and down these rocks. So we are done with today's tutorial on rocks. In the next tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a floating yacht just off the coast of the island. So stay subscribed, stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.